Imagine waking up every single day for 2 years straight, looking at your internal mental battery and realizing it is already capped at 10%.
Wow, yeah.
10%. Right. You haven't even gotten out of bed or, done anything yet, but you are just completely drained.
Just running on empty from the second you wake up.
Exactly. And honestly, the absolute scariest part of this whole scenario, you don't even think you're sick. You just kind of think, well, I guess this is just who I am now.
Right, it just becomes your normal.
It does. And so today we're looking at this really brief informational overview from a Georgia-based telehealth practice called Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC.
Yeah, the CHC text.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this very specific, incredibly insidious condition that they describe. The source brilliantly calls it a slow leak, which I love. And we're going to explore how modern telehealth infrastructure is being deployed to actively combat it.
It's a fascinating topic, really.
It is. So, okay, let's unpack this because reading this overview is a lot like looking at a densely packed prescription label.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Or maybe like a highly technical architectural blueprint, Because at first glance, it just looks brief.
It really is just a few short lines.
Just a few lines of text. But if you look closely, and I mean really read between the lines here, there is a life-changing amount of clinical and logistical information packed into this very small space.
The brevity of this source is actually deceptive, I think, because, well, in medicine, and especially in the field of mental health, both clinicians and patients are heavily conditioned to look for the emergencies.
Right, the big red flags.
Exactly. We look for the dramatic events, the loud cries for help. But the most dangerous problems aren't always the loud ones.
They're the quiet ones.
They are. Often they're the very quiet ones, the conditions that go completely unnoticed because they just gradually fade into the background of your everyday life.
Until you don't even know what's happening.
Right, until you literally forget what a healthy baseline even looks like.
It's just background noise. And the text actually gives a specific name to this kind of background noise, but I have to admit, it uses a word I had to go look up.
Oh, dysthymia.
Yes. Dysthymia. I mean, to me, that sounds like a heart arrhythmia or some kind of blood condition.
It really does.
So what exactly is going on with that clinical term?
Well, it does sound deeply physiological, doesn't it? But dysthymia was the older clinical name for what this text is focusing on. Now, it's officially called Persistent Depressive Disorder, or PDD.
Okay, PDD.
Right. And the shift in terminology is actually really important because the new name, Persistent Depressive Disorder, it highlights exactly what makes this condition so challenging to identify and treat.
Because it's persistent.
The key word there is definitely persistent. The source explicitly defines this not as a sudden crash, but as a low-grade depression that runs continuously in the background for 2 years or more.
2 years.
Think about that time frame. 2 solid years of an untreated low-grade leak.
That is just wild to me. And the source actually quotes a central misconception that folks dealing with this often have. They start describing feeling gray for as long as you can remember.
Yes, that gray feeling.
But wait, I have to ask a question that I think a lot of people reading this or listening to us might have.
Sure, go ahead.
If I'm reading this text and thinking, well, I'm just a bit low energy, but I still go to work, I still pay my bills, why shouldn't I just push through it? I mean, we all have stressful years, right? Life is hard, work is exhausting. At what point does life is hard cross the line into I need medical intervention?
What's fascinating here is how the human brain adapts to its environment, even when that environment is internal and, frankly, deeply unhealthy.
Right.
When you experience a sudden crash, like a major depressive episode, the contrast in your life is stark.
It's obvious.
Very obvious.
Yeah.
You remember clearly what it felt like to be okay yesterday, and you know definitively that you are not okay today.
The alarm bells are ringing.
The alarm bells ring loudly. But a slow leak happens so incredibly gradually. That 2-year timeline is the critical factor here.
Because it just creeps up on you.
Exactly. 2 years is more than enough time for a medical condition to completely camouflage itself as a permanent personality trait.
Oh, wow. It's like having a slow carbon monoxide leak in your house.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Because there's no fire, There is no smoke. There's no loud crash to wake you up in the middle of the night.
You don't even realize you're suffocating.
Right. Slowly, over 2 years, the oxygen is just leaving the room and you simply feel sleepy. You don't blame the air. You blame yourself for being tired.
That is exactly it. Because the baseline shifts so slowly, You completely lose your frame of reference. You stop remembering what a fully oxygenated room feels like.
You just think, well, breathing is hard.
Right. You just assume that being gray, being slightly deflated, is your natural permanent state of being. You start telling yourself that you are just a pessimistic person or you're just someone who doesn't have a lot of energy.
Wow.
You blame your character rather than recognizing a persistent treatable medical condition.
Which makes looking at the actual list of symptoms in the source incredibly illuminating.
It really does.
Because now that we understand conceptually what this slow leak is doing to the baseline, we have to look at how the text says it actually manifests in everyday life.
The day-to-day reality of it.
Exactly. The source gives a very specific cluster of signs. It lists persistent low mood, low energy, low self-esteem, sleep and appetite changes, hopelessness, and difficulty making decisions.
Notice how none of those symptoms, on their own, on a random Tuesday, scream medical emergency.
Right. I mean, if I have a bad night of sleep, I just drink more coffee.
Exactly. If you have a bad night of sleep, or you skip lunch, or you feel down about a project at work, you don't instantly rush to the hospital thinking you have a depressive disorder.
Oh, wow. So it's exactly like leaving your map app running in your pocket on your smartphone.
Yes. The battery drain?
You know, when you pick up your phone at noon and it's already at 10% battery and you haven't even really used it to make any calls?
Yeah, it's so frustrating.
Right. You don't realize there are 10 navigation and social media apps quietly burning through the battery in the background. That is what these symptoms are doing.
They're running in the background constantly.
Low mood, low self-esteem. They are hidden background apps draining your mental battery before your day even begins.
And because that battery is drained by those hidden background processes, we see symptoms emerge that people rarely associate with depression.
That brings up the one symptom that really jumped out at me from the text.
Which one was that?
Difficulty making decisions.
Yes.
I think the general public expects depression to mean visible sadness or crying, but decision fatigue, a lack of executive function. That is a highly surprising symptom that I don't think most people would expect to see on this list.
It is deeply misunderstood, I agree. But it makes perfect sense when you look at the mechanics of the brain. PDD deeply affects cognitive function.
Because it's draining the battery.
Right. If your brain is constantly dedicating a massive percentage of its background processing power just to keep you afloat, managing that persistent low energy, fighting off the low self-esteem, trying to function despite disrupted sleep, there is very little cognitive bandwidth left for executive functions.
You literally do not have the processing power left to decide what to have for dinner, let alone make a major career choice.
Precisely. And this is where we see how these symptoms compound horrifically over that 2-year time frame.
They feed into each other.
Yes, it's a cycle. You start with sleep and appetite changes. That naturally drains your physical energy.
Right.
Because your physical energy is low, your cognitive bandwidth shrinks, leading directly to that difficulty making decisions.
Because then you start messing up at work.
Exactly. You start dropping the ball at work or ignoring things at home because you literally cannot decide what to do next. Dropping those balls fuels the low self-esteem and deepens the persistent low mood.
Man, that is brutal.
It is. When that cycle spins round and round for 2 years or more, it eventually leads to the heaviest, most dangerous symptom mentioned in the source, hopelessness.
Because you look back at 2 solid years of this cycle, and your brain concludes, well, this is just who I am now.
You start to believe it.
I'm a person who can't make decisions, who drops the ball, and who has no energy. The hopelessness isn't random. It feels like a logical conclusion to the premise the disease has set up.
It is a manufactured hopelessness.
Manufactured hopelessness, I like that term.
Yeah, it feels like an objective, rational assessment of your life, but it's actually the disease analyzing itself.
It's the disease talking. Recognizing that your battery is at 10% is a heavy realization, but recognizing it is completely useless if you can't find a charger.
That's very true. You need a solution.
And this is where the text pivots quite dramatically. Right after laying out this heavy reality, the source explicitly states, quote, "The good news, treatment works."
Yes, there's a lot of hope in this overview.
They offer a very specific arsenal of treatments to patch the leak. But the text uses a lot of acronyms here.
The medical alphabet soup.
Right, the alphabet soup. They mention CBT, IPT, SSRIs, and SNRIs. Before we talk about how they work together, can we break down what this actually means?
Absolutely. It is vital to demystify these terms. Let's start with the medications. SSRIs and SNRIs.
Okay.
These stand for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors.
Okay, but how are those actually patching the leak? What are they doing inside the brain?
They work by physically altering how your brain's communication system functions. Your brain cells communicate using chemical messengers, like serotonin.
Right, the happy chemical.
Well, sort of, yeah. In someone with a depressive disorder, those chemicals often get reabsorbed too quickly by the brain before they can properly transmit the signal.
Ah, so the message gets dropped.
Exactly.
Mm.
And SSRI or SNRI blocks that reabsorption. It keeps those essential chemicals in the synaptic gap longer, allowing your brain to actually receive the message of well-being and energy.
So if your brain is a car engine, the medication isn't necessarily fuel. It's more like making sure the oil actually coats the gears instead of instantly draining out into the pan.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
It lets the engine run smoothly without grinding itself to a halt.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it.
Yeah.
It establishes a biological floor and gives you the baseline energy to function. But medication alone doesn't rewrite the bad code that is built up over 2 years.
You need the therapy for that.
Right. That is where the therapies come in. CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, and IPT stands for Interpersonal Therapy.
So how does CBT actually rewrite that bad code?
Well, CBT targets the internal thought loops, that manufactured hopelessness we discussed. A therapist works with you to identify a thought like, I am just a lazy, worthless person.
A thought that feels like a fact to the patient.
Exactly. But instead of accepting it, CBT teaches you to examine the evidence. You look at the 2-year timeline of the slow leak and consciously reframe the thought into, I am not lazy. I have a medical condition that is actively depleting my energy.
Oh, wow. So you actively push back against the disease.
It is an active rewiring of how you process reality.
And what about IPT?
I, on the other hand, addresses the external damage. If you've been running on a slow leak for 2 years, your relationships have likely suffered.
Yeah, I'm sure your family notices.
Right. Your spouse or friends might think you're just ignoring them. IPT focuses specifically on repairing how you communicate and connect with others.
Which brings us to a crucial data point the text drops. The source states that meta-analyses show that combination treatment outperforms either therapy or medication alone.
This is a very important point in the clinical overview.
But wait, let me push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
If I'm reading this and thinking, okay, I have a low-grade issue, I'm not totally crashing, do I really need to go straight for the heavy artillery of both talk therapy and daily medications?
It sounds like a lot, doesn't it?
It does. Wouldn't starting with just one or the other be enough for a low-grade problem?
This raises an important question, and honestly, it's one of the most common reservations people have when entering treatment.
I bet.
To understand why the source insists on this, we have to understand what a meta-analysis actually is.
It's not just one study, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
It is not just one study. Researchers pool the data across dozens or hundreds of different studies, analyzing outcomes from thousands of patients to find the absolute clearest, statistically proven truth.
So this is hard data.
Very hard data. And the aggregate data proves something highly counterintuitive. Attacking a 2-year entrenched issue requires a multi-pronged approach.
Because it's dug in. It's camouflaged as your personality.
Exactly. Just because PDD is low grade does not mean it is easy to uproot. The medication gives you the physical and cognitive bandwidth to actually engage in the CBT.
Because therapy is hard work.
It is exhausting work. Without the medication, you might not have the energy to do the mental work of therapy.
And without the therapy.
Without the therapy, the medication just masks the symptoms without addressing the negative thought patterns you've built over years. The combination validates just how severe a slow leak actually is.
But here is the massive catch. Knowing the treatment strategy is one thing. Actually accessing it is an entirely different beast.
This is where the system usually breaks down.
Right. The traditional mental health system usually fails PDD patients because the very logistics of getting help calling around, driving to an office, fighting insurance, require the exact energy that the disease steals from you.
The barrier to entry is just too high.
Which brings us to how Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC, engineered a logistical bypass for all of this.
The logistics of mental health care are just as critical as the clinical interventions. I mean, a brilliant treatment plan is completely useless if the patient cannot clear the hurdles to get into the room.
So let's look at the infrastructure CHC built to remove those hurdles. First, they are a 100% telehealth practice, fully HIPAA compliant, and they serve all 159 counties in Georgia.
That statewide reach is huge.
It is. Their team consists of over 15 licensed therapists. And again, the text lists acronyms for the staff: LCSWs, LPCs, LMFTs.
More alphabet soup.
More alphabet soup. For the listener who might not know, we are talking about licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, and licensed marriage and family therapists.
And the variety of those licenses is deeply intentional. It means they have specialized experts for whatever specific friction this depression is causing in your life.
Right. The text notes they serve teens from 13 up, individuals, couples, and families.
Which is so needed.
Think about a family dynamic where one parent has had an unrecognized slow leak for years. The other partner assumes they are just emotionally distant. The teens thinks the parent doesn't care, and resentment just builds.
It tears families apart.
You don't just need individual therapy there. You need an LMFT to come in and untangle the relational damage the leak caused.
And by having all of those specialists under one completely virtual roof, CHC drastically reduces the decision fatigue we talked about earlier.
You don't have to Google 10 different places.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to research 10 different practices. You contact one place, and they can match you internally with the right specialist.
But here's where it gets really interesting: the financial realities of this blueprint.
The financials are quite shocking, honestly.
They list their insurance coverage. Major insurances like Aetna, Cigna, BCBS, UHC, Humana, they range from just $10 to $40 a session. But the one line that jumped completely off the page at me: Medicaid is a $0 copay. $0.
In the current United States healthcare landscape,
Yeah.
that is practically a unicorn.
It really is. If you have ever tried to use state insurance for mental health care, you know it is usually a bureaucratic nightmare.
The wait lists alone are staggering.
You are dealing with endless wait lists, offices that are full, or providers who simply do not accept it. Seeing a $0 Medicaid copay attached to a practice with 15-plus therapists available immediately via telehealth is astounding.
It really changes the game.
CHC's model feels like they took the frictionless experience of modern online shopping, where you click a button and it just seamlessly happens, and applied that exact same architecture to mental health care.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you will see how this specific business model is practically a medical intervention in itself.
How so?
Well, let's look back at the symptoms of PDD. Zero energy, profound difficulty making decisions, and deep hopelessness.
Right, the 10% battery.
Exactly. Now, imagine telling someone suffering from those exact symptoms that they need to spend 3 hours researching therapists, make 5 phone calls, handle the geography of driving across town in rush hour traffic, and then figure out how to afford a massive out-of-pocket fee.
They won't do it. The battery is at 10%. They will just put the phone down and go back to sleep.
They physically and cognitively cannot do it. The traditional barriers to entry actively reinforce the disease's hopelessness. But CHC's structure systematically dismantles every single one of those barriers. By being 100% telehealth across all 159 counties, they instantly eliminate the geographical barrier, which is massive in a state like Georgia with so many spread out rural areas.
You literally do not have to leave your couch.
You don't. By maintaining a large, diverse team, they eliminate the decision fatigue of finding the right fit. And by establishing that extreme affordability model, $10 to $40 for major insurance, and literally $0 for Medicaid, they completely shatter the financial barrier.
It's totally frictionless.
They have engineered every ounce of friction out of the process, making it incredibly easy for someone with zero energy to fall into a safety net.
It is brilliant. They looked at the exact reasons people do not get help for a slow leak and built a structure that systematically removes every single excuse.
It's exactly what the system needs.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's summarize the journey we've just taken through this surprisingly dense clinical overview.
It's been quite a ride.
We started by recognizing the gray background noise of persistent depressive disorder. We learned that the slow leak of low mood, sleep changes, and decision fatigue isn't just you being you. It is a 2-year compounding medical cycle that leads to a manufactured hopelessness.
A very real but very treatable condition.
Exactly. But we also learned that there is a highly specific, easily accessible telehealth infrastructure waiting to help. Through the combined, multi-pronged approach of therapy, rewiring your thoughts, and medication repairing your biological floor, that leak can be patched.
Treatment works.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
And the source makes a point to provide the direct contact info. As anything we've discussed today resonates with you, you can reach the team at Coping and Healing Counseling at 404-832-0102. You can also visit them at sheettherapy.com or email support@sheettherapy.com.
It's always good to have that info handy.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? I want to remind you directly of the core central message of this text. If you or someone you know has felt grave for years, it is a treatable medical condition. It is not a character flaw. You are not just like this.
And I'll leave you with this final thought to mull over.
Mm.
The source notes that a 2-year slow leak can rewire someone into believing, this is just how I am. It shrinks their world to match their low energy.
Yeah.
But if that's true, if millions of people are walking around with this camouflaged condition, running on 10% battery and accepting it as normal, what latent potential, what untouched creativity, and what profound joy might be unleashed in our society if we collectively stopped accepting a gray existence as normal?
That is a powerful question.
What would happen if we started treating the quiet, slow leaks with the exact same urgency as we treat the loud crashes?
It makes you look at that brief little prescription label of a text completely differently, doesn't it? The blueprint to fix a leak is right there. It just takes a decision to read it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.